So there I am, a little earlier in the week in one of those fantasy football drafts, and boom, there goes Christian McCaffrey with the number one draft pick, followed up by Austin Eckler. Look, I started to wonder as this draft was unfolding, why do fantasy football owners put so much value on running backs, but the actual owners in the National Football League don't? That is today's topic on the House of Takes pod. I am Dave DeBaugh. Thanks so much for tuning in to the show. If you haven't had a chance to subscribe yet, please go and subscribe if you're watching this on YouTube and or any of the other podcast platforms that you might be hearing this on. All right, on to the content we go. Now, not doing a show here on fantasy football and who you should pick with your first five picks, but it just got me wondering, why do we put so much value as fantasy football owners on running backs, but the actual owners in the National Football League don't? I mean, it is crazy when you think about how hard it is for a top-tier running back to actually get paid in the National Football League this past offseason. As you all know, I'm a huge Minnesota Viking fan. The Vikings flat out released Dalvin Cook. When you look at how much Dalvin Cook represented to that Minnesota Viking offense last season, it is going to be very difficult for the Minnesota Vikings to replace what Dalvin was able to bring to the table. Now, the Vikes certainly wanted to go in a different direction. They wanted to go in a different direction that didn't include paying Dalvin Cook over $12 million a year. As for the other NFL owners, Jonathan Taylor's saga in Indianapolis is just, quite frankly, flat out ridiculous. The league's leader in rushing 2 years ago probably would have been the league's leading rusher last season if he hadn't gotten injured, can't get paid by Jim Irsay and the Indianapolis Colts, can't get traded to another team. It is a flat out crazy how the National Football League running backs have turned into, quite frankly, endangered species. Now, some of the stats on this basically support what fantasy football owners know, what I also know as a fan of the National Football League. What the NFL owners don't seem to understand is how important a great running back can be to your team. Now, look, I don't think great running backs are going to be Adrian Peterson and play for 10 plus years in the National Football League. Obviously, the length of period of time that a running back can be great in the National Football League is far shorter than other positions in the NFL. I mean, for God's sakes, a left tackle could play in the National Football League for 15 years if he does a good job taking care of himself. A running back, on the other hand, you're looking at 4 to 6 years of potential greatness. And quite frankly, that's all you can expect out of a running back in the NFL. Now, the stats on this are absolutely just so interesting when you actually look at how points are actually made in between wide receivers and running backs. So I took a look at how many touchdowns were actually scored in the 2022 National Football League season. And wide receivers scored a grand total of 484 touchdowns in 2022 in the National Football League. 25 of those were actually rushing touchdowns. Running backs, on the other hand, scored a grand total of 454 touchdowns as the running back committee. Now, the rushing touchdown side of the fence, they put in 353 rushing touchdowns. When you start to look at these stats and you see what a average wide receiver is going to get paid in the National Football League. Now, remember, now I'm talking about averages. An average wide receiver in the National Football League, according to Sport Track, a wide receiver is going to earn over $3.3 million a year. Average wide receiver. We know that there are wide receivers that are making 15 to 20 plus million dollars a year. The average salary for a running back in the National Football League is $2.2 million. It is, of all the positions on the offensive side of the ball, it is has the lowest of average of any position in the National Football League on the offensive side of the ball. If you were to look at the defensive side of the ball, it actually does as well. So between the offense and the defense, nobody gets paid less than a running back. I should also point out that nobody takes as much punishment as a running back does. Look, I understand the rules of supply and demand. And that, quite frankly, is really what's happening here with this particular position. Because every single year, there's a bunch of really good young running backs that, quite frankly, don't even get drafted, that are going to find their ways onto rosters in the National Football League, and not only find their way onto rosters, but actually have an impact on those particular teams. I'm going to mention one team, and that is the Pittsburgh Steelers. Just watch the Pittsburgh Steelers this season and tell me, when you hear about the running back who was undrafted, who is now a key component of the Pittsburgh Steeler offense. Look, it might not happen in week one. It might not happen in week two, but I guarantee halfway through the season, Pittsburgh's going to have a budding superstar on their roster, and it's going to be a running back that was undrafted. Look, undrafted running backs, undrafted cornerbacks, almost undrafted quarterbacks, and like Brock Purdy, Mr. Irrelevant, can certainly find a way to be very successful in the National Football League. What I don't understand is when a owner like Jim Irsay has a running back who is in those first 6 years of his career and has already led the league in rushing, and he's unwilling to pay him at a level which justifies what he's actually doing for his team on the field. That, my friends, makes absolutely no sense to me. Remember the stats. The offensive coordinators in the National Football League, the head coaches in the National Football League, the defensive coordinators are all trying to do something positive with running backs on a regular basis. They're trying to get running backs to hit the holes faster. They're trying to get running backs to catch the ball out of the backfield. They're trying to get running backs to try to block a 275-pound blitzing man coming off of the edge, and they're trying to get them to sit down and block those players. Everybody understands the importance of running backs in the National Football League. Offensive coordinators certainly do too. If they didn't, we wouldn't have had over 350 rushing touchdowns in the National Football League in 2022. All right, that is it for today's House of Takes pod. It is a Friday night, September 1st of the year 2023. Hey, if you haven't had a chance to subscribe to the House of Takes pod yet, please definitely go ahead and do so. And of course, like this video. Coming up over the weekend, we'll be getting our predictions for the upcoming National Football League season, as well as week one out the door. And at some point next week, we will be bringing back the Gods of Odds show, which is a show between Brad Hoysef and myself, where we pick the top 10 games in the National Football League worth actually spending some money on. All right, for the House of Takes pod, I am Dave DeBaugh, wishing you all a tremendous rest of your sports viewing day.